The signs had been there for months. Late nights at the office, again, texts that went unanswered for hours, only for her to claim her phone had died. Unexplained charges on our credit card for hotels and restaurants I'd never been to. At first I told myself I was paranoid. Maybe work really was that demanding. Maybe she just needed space. But then came the little things, the way she'd angle her phone screen away from me, the sudden perfume she didn't used to wear, the distance in her touch when we used to be inseparable. The final straw was the Thursday she came home at midnight, her blouse wrinkled, her lipstick smeared. "Another work meeting?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Yeah, ran late." I exhaled, long and slow, my fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. "Funny, I called your office. They said you left at 6. Her breath hitched, just for a second, but it was enough. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing by outside. Everything felt too loud and too quiet all at once. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything. The betrayal settled over me like a weight, pressing down until all that was left was cold, hard clarity. "Pack your things," I said, my voice steady, "and leave." For a moment, she just stood there, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something, maybe an excuse, maybe an apology. But the truth was already written between us. Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs. And just like that, the life we'd built together was over. Or so I thought. The first few days were the strangest. The house didn't just feel empty, it felt hollow, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I kept expecting to hear her keys jingle in the door, her laugh echoing from the kitchen, the soft hum of her voice on a phone call. But there was nothing, just silence. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office just to avoid coming home. My coworkers gave me sympathetic looks, but didn't ask questions. They knew. Everyone knew. The story of I kicked my wife out didn't need details. It wrote itself in the way I moved, the way my smiles never reached my eyes. My friends tried to help. "You did the right thing," Mark said, clapping me on the back at the bar one night. "No one deserves to be played like that." I nodded, swirling my whiskey, but the words didn't comfort me, because the truth was, I didn't feel like some righteous man who'd stood up for himself. I just felt untethered. I slept on the couch for a week before I could bring myself to go back to our bed. Even then, I lay on my side, staring at the empty space beside me, the ghost of her perfume still clinging to the sheets. I deleted her number, then undeleted it, then deleted it again. Weeks passed without a single call or text from her. No apologies, no explanations, no desperate pleas to work things out. Just radio silence. And that was what hurt the most. Had I meant so little to her that she could walk away without even looking back? I started running in the mornings, punishing my body just to feel something other than the gnawing emptiness in my chest. I rearranged the furniture, donated her favorite chair to Goodwill, and took down the photos that lined the hallway, our wedding day, vacations, birthdays. The memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. One night, I found one of her hair ties tangled in the couch cushions. Something so small, so stupid. I held it in my palm for a long time before tossing it in the trash. Then, 5 minutes later, I dug it back out and shoved it in the junk drawer, like some pathetic keepsake. I told myself I was moving on. But the truth? I was just going through the motions, waiting for something, anything to make me feel like myself again. And then, 3 weeks later, the knock came, software hesitant, like someone who wasn't sure they were welcome anymore. The knock came just past midnight. 3 quiet raps that barely cut through the hum of the TV. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. Nobody came by this late. Nobody came by at all anymore. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. I muted the baseball game and listened. The porch light was off, but through the peephole I could make out a silhouette. Slight, hunched, one arm wrapped around itself like it was holding something together, or holding something back. My stomach dropped before my brain even registered who it was. I yanked the door open so hard the knob rattled. There she stood. God, she looked terrible, not the put-together woman who'd walked out 8 weeks ago in designer heels and cold silence. This version of her had chipped nail polish and a too big sweatshirt that might have been mine once. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks blotchy like she'd been crying for hours or days. But what stopped me dead was what she was clutching against her chest. A manila envelope, bent at the corners from how tightly she was gripping it. "Please," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the word. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. The anger came first, white hot and familiar. "You don't get to show up here in the middle of the—" "I'm pregnant." The words hit like a sucker punch. My mouth kept moving, but no sound came out. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm started wailing. She thrust the envelope at me. Inside, grainy black and white ultrasound photos slid out. A date stamp from 2 weeks ago. Measurements. A tiny bean-shaped blur labeled 10 weeks. My hand started shaking. "It's yours," she said, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked me straight in the eyes. "I swear on my life, it's yours. But Her breath hitched. "I need you to know why I didn't tell you sooner." A cold dread crept up my spine, because the way she said it, the way her fingers trembled against that envelope, this wasn't just about an affair. This was about something worse. I stepped back to let her in. The door hadn't even clicked shut before she said the words that would split my life into before and after. They told me I might lose it, and I couldn't let you go through that again. Again. The single word hung between us, sharp as a blade, because we'd never lost a baby before. Had we? The air in the room turned thick, like I was breathing through wet cloth. Again. That word echoed in my skull, bouncing off memories that suddenly didn't make sense. "What the hell are you talking about?" My voice came out too loud, too raw. She flinched, but didn't back away. The ultrasound photos trembled in her hands as she reached into the envelope again. This time she pulled out a faded medical form, the kind with carbon copies and smudged hospital letterhead. Patient: Emily Carter. Date: 3 years ago. Procedure: D&C after missed miscarriage, 8 weeks gestation. My vision tunneled. The dates lined up with that business trip to Chicago, the one where she'd FaceTime me every night claiming she had the flu, the week she'd come home quieter, clingier, sleeping with her back pressed against me like she was afraid I'd disappear. "You were pregnant." The words tasted like ash. "And you didn't tell me." Her tears fell in earnest now, streaking down her face. "I was going to, but then at the scan they couldn't find a heartbeat and—" She sucked in a shuddering breath. "You just lost your dad. You were barely holding it together as it was. I couldn't drop that on you, too." The room tilted. I gripped the back of the couch, the fabric rough under my fingers. All those nights I'd held her while she cried, assuming it was grief for my father. All the times she'd insisted we weren't ready to try for kids when I brought it up. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. "And the affair?" She wiped her face with her sleeve. "There was no affair." I barked out a laugh. "Bullshit. The hotel charges, the late nights." "Fertility treatments." She pressed a hand to her stomach. "After the miscarriage, my doctor said it might be hard to conceive again. I used our savings, then the credit cards when that ran out. Those hotel charges were at the women's clinic by the airport." The truth landed like a physical blow. All my certainty about her betrayal, about kicking her out, about being the wronged party, crumbled in an instant. Then the ultrasound photo caught my eye again. That tiny, fragile blur. "This baby," I croaked. "The doctor really said—" "High risk," she bit her lip, "but strong heartbeat. I've been on bed rest since you—" Her voice broke. "I only came tonight because the bleeding started again." Ice flooded my veins. "You're bleeding now?" Her nod was barely perceptible. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the lies, not the anger, not the 3 years of hidden grief. Only the terrifying, exhilarating possibility in that grainy image. I grabbed my keys off the counter. "We're going to the ER." For the first time in months, she didn't argue. The ER waiting room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. The flickering fluorescent lights made Emily look even paler as she sat stiffly in the plastic chair, her hands folded protectively over her stomach. I paced in front of her, my mind racing faster than my heartbeat. Every time I looked at her, I felt like I was seeing a stranger. The woman I'd shared a life with had carried so many secrets, grief I never knew about, pain she'd buried deep. And yet, the way she bit her lip when she was nervous, the little crease between her eyebrows when she was worried, those were still the same. How could she not tell me? The question burned through me. We'd promised each other no secrets, no matter how hard things got. But she had taken the choice away from me, the chance to grieve with her, to hold her through the loss. And now with this baby, my throat tightened. The possibility of a child, our child, sent a surge of protectiveness through me so fierce it startled me, but tangled up with it was a raw, jagged betrayal. "You should have told me," I said finally, my voice low. Emily's fingers tightened around the edge of her seat. "I know." "No, you don't know." I stopped pacing and turned to face her. "You don't know what it's like to find out that the person you trusted most in the world didn't trust you back." Her eyes welled up again. "I did trust you. I couldn't watch you break. Not after your dad. Not when I was barely holding myself together." I exhaled sharply. That was the worst part. I understood. I remembered how dark those months after my father's death had been, how she had been the one to pull me out of it. But understanding didn't erase the hurt. A nurse called her name, and she stood shakily. For a second she hesitated, like she wanted to reach for me but wasn't sure she was allowed anymore. I didn't reach back, but I followed her into the exam room. The doctor's voice was calm as she explained the risks, the precautions, the need for more tests. Emily nodded silently, her face drawn but determined, and then the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. Thump, 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 strong, steady, alive. Emily's breath hitched, and before I could stop myself, my hand found hers. Her fingers curled around mine like they'd done 1,000 times before. In that moment, none of the anger mattered. There was only this fragile, terrifying hope. But when the doctor left and the room fell quiet again, the weight of everything unsaid settled between us. I pulled my hand away. "This doesn't fix anything," I said quietly. She swallowed hard. "I know." The truth was, I didn't know if we could come back from this. But for the first time since she'd left, I wasn't sure I wanted to let her go. The paternity test results arrived on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my car outside the lab for 20 minutes before going in, staring at the pristine white envelope on the passenger seat like it might burst into flames. The truth was in there, black ink on sterile paper that would either shatter what was left of us or bind me to Emily in a way I couldn't take back. When I finally tore it open, the words blurred before coming into focus. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I exhaled hard, my grip crumpling the edge of the page. This changed everything, and nothing. Emily was waiting on my front porch when I pulled into the driveway, her knees drawn up to her chest like she used to sit in college. She stood as I approached, her eyes searching mine for answers before I spoke a word. "It's mine," I said. The relief that washed over her face was so raw, it hurt to look at. But then her expression faltered. "That doesn't mean you have to—" "I know." I cut her off before she could finish. "But I want to be there. For the appointments. For everything." The unspoken for now hung between us. She nodded, tears spilling over. "Okay." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the ultrasound photo propped on my nightstand. Somewhere between the ER and today, the anger had dulled into something more complicated, a tangled mess of betrayal and hope and fear. I kept remembering the way her hand had felt in mine when we heard the heartbeat, the way she still smelled like the same lavender shampoo she'd used for years, the way she'd hidden her grief to protect me, just like I'd hidden my drinking after Dad died. We were both liars, both broken, and now, against all odds, we might get a chance to build something new from the wreckage. But first, we had to decide if we still knew how to trust each other. The baby would come either way. The question was, would we? The nursery was finished by the time she went into labor. Soft gray walls, a crib neither of us could afford, and a mobile that played a lullaby I'd loved as a child. We'd built it together in fragile silence, her waddling with the pregnancy books I'd secretly read, me pretending not to notice when she cried over tiny socks. When the contractions started, I drove too fast to the hospital, my knuckles white on the wheel. She didn't complain, just gripped the dashboard and breathed the way we'd practiced in those awkward Lamaze classes I'd insisted on attending. Then came the screams, the blood, the terrifying moment when the monitors shrieked and nurses rushed in, and then her, slippery and squalling and perfect, with Emily's nose and my stubborn chin. They placed her on Emily's chest, and something inside me cracked open. I reached out without thinking, my finger brushing our daughter's miniature hand. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with a strength that stole my breath. Emily looked up at me then, exhausted and radiant and terrified. Neither of us said, "I love you." But when I climbed into the hospital bed beside them, careful of the IV tubes, and pressed my lips to our baby's forehead, Emily leaned into me. Her hair smelled like sweat and antiseptic and home. The papers still sat unsigned on the kitchen table back home. The hurt still lived between us like a third person in the room. But right then, with our daughter's heartbeat against mine, I understood the truth. Throwing her out was easy. Forgiving her was hard. But this, choosing to stay when every instinct said run, this was the bravest thing I'd ever do.